There's something uniquely disturbing about an empty room, not because anything is necessarily there, but because it feels like something should be. That's the foundation of the Backrooms. Endless yellow walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, stained carpet, and an overwhelming sense that reality has somehow gone slightly wrong. What started as a simple internet creepypasta has evolved into something much bigger through Kane Parsons' analog horror universe, and the 2026 film takes that concept and turns it into a psychological nightmare. But beneath the monsters and the endless corridors, the Backrooms is really a story about trauma, accountability, and the human tendency to repeat the same destructive patterns. And at the center of all of it are three characters: Clark, Dr. Mary, and the mysterious organization known as Async. To understand the world of the Backrooms, we have to start with Async. Async is a fictional research institute based in San Jose, California, and its work begins with a seemingly practical goal: solving problems involving space, storage, and eventually humanity's growing population. Their breakthrough comes through Project KV-31, the low-proximity magnetic distortion system. But instead of simply manipulating space, Async accidentally discovers a doorway into another dimension. And that dimension becomes what we know as the Backrooms, or, within the story, the complex. Async begins exploring it systematically, sending personnel inside, wearing those iconic yellow hazmat suits and documenting what they discover. The problem is that the complex isn't simply an empty alternate dimension. Its connection to our world begins destabilizing reality itself. People disappear, strange areas begin appearing, and eventually, the boundary between the Backrooms and the real world becomes increasingly difficult to contain. Async essentially discovers something humanity was never prepared to understand. And then we meet Clark. Clark is a furniture store owner and a failed architect whose personal life is collapsing around him. He's dealing with a struggling business, a messy divorce, and years of unresolved emotional problems. But Clark's biggest problem isn't necessarily what happened to him. It's how he responds to what happened. He constantly looks outward for someone to blame: his ex-wife, his employees, even his therapist, Mary. And that's where the Backrooms become especially interesting. For Clark, the endless architecture isn't just terrifying, it's also strangely appealing. As a failed architect, he's suddenly confronted with an infinite environment. A place without limits, without criticism, and without anyone telling him that he's failed. The Backrooms become an escape. Eventually, the dimension begins recreating pieces of his memories and his life, giving Clark something even more dangerous than fear: comfort. He doesn't just want to escape the Backrooms. At a certain point, he wants to escape reality itself. Then there's Dr. Mary Clean, Clark's therapist. Mary's motivation is almost the opposite of Clark's. Her entire career is built around helping people escape destructive cycles. But that desire comes from her own childhood. Mary grew up with a mother suffering from severe mental illness and agoraphobia. Eventually, the situation became so serious that Mary was removed from the home and her mother was institutionalized. That experience shaped Mary's entire identity. She becomes a therapist because, on some level, she wants to save people in the way she couldn't save her mother. And that's exactly what happens with Clark. When Clark first tells Mary about the impossible world he's discovered, she doesn't believe him. From her perspective, it looks like a psychological breakdown. But when Clark disappears into the hidden entrance beneath his furniture store, Mary is left with an uncomfortable realization. Maybe she failed him. So she follows him into the Backrooms. But Mary isn't simply rescuing Clark. She's confronting her own need to save people who may not actually want to be saved. The therapy sessions are essentially the psychological spine of the movie. Early on, Mary explains that the human brain tends to follow familiar neural pathways, the path of least resistance. In other words, when we're hurt, we often fall back into the behaviors we already know. Clark doesn't like hearing that. He struggles to accept responsibility, and when he tries to explain the Backrooms, Mary's skepticism pushes him further away. Eventually, Clark turns the entire situation around. Inside the Backrooms, he forces Mary into a grotesque version of a therapy session. But now the power dynamic has changed. Mary confronts Clark directly, telling him that he can't continue, blaming everyone else for the life he's created. And this is where the movie's horror becomes psychological. The monsters aren't simply hunting Clark, they're reflecting him. The most disturbing example is Captain Clark, or Pirate Clark. He's an enormous, grotesque version of Clark, dressed in a bizarre pirate costume. But he isn't simply another monster. He's essentially Clark's worst qualities given physical form: rage, guilt, selfishness, and destructive instinct without the restraints of normal human behavior. And he's only one of the still lifes. The complex creates distorted replicas of people, objects, and memories, like the wheelchair-bound Archibald Leland Sutter, the strange bearded entity, the red-headed still life, and the horrifying distorted versions of async personnel. These creatures make one idea very clear. The Backrooms doesn't just create monsters, it creates reflections. And that brings us to the ending. Clark is ultimately given an opportunity to leave with Mary, but he refuses. He chooses the trauma. That's really the tragedy of Clark. The Backrooms didn't necessarily destroy him by force. It gave him exactly what he wanted: an endless world where he could avoid accountability and live inside his own distorted reality. And eventually, his worst traits come back to destroy him in the form of Captain Clark. Mary, meanwhile, finally understands that she can't rescue everyone. She can offer help, she can offer empathy, but she can't force someone to change. And that's what makes The Backrooms more than just a movie about yellow rooms and terrifying creatures. It's a story about what happens when we become comfortable inside our own trauma and what it takes to finally walk away from it. Because sometimes the scariest place isn't another dimension, it's the one we build inside ourselves.